Cox today is our key speaker for the meeting, along with Mariah. And we'll let them take over for a while, and then we'll get back together and maybe have some discussions and some questions. Anyway, thank you, Robin. The floor is yours.
Hi, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I am prof at Royal Roads University, which sits on the unceded territories of the Kongan and Kosamsen families and their ancestors. Very privileged to live here and recognize that privilege every day when I look out my window. I am also the director of the Resilience by Design Lab and a project of ours called the Adaptation Learning Network. And it's sort of in the context of that I'm chatting with you today. So they've given me 10 minutes, so I'm going to turn my timer on now and share a PowerPoint. Yeah, so I've been involved in this notion of workforce development around adaptation is one of the key focuses of the Resilience by Design Lab. One of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years is just trying to track jobs that we become aware of, either government jobs or private sector, that have some adaptation focus. It's obviously a growing field, and I think Maria's talking maybe more specifically, and these jobs are all ones in Canada because that's the audience that we work with. But we have noticed this increasing groundswell of jobs. Obviously, there's still more jobs on the mitigation emissions reduction side, but increasingly we're seeing jobs like resilience manager, resilience coordinator for a community or for an organization. The Adaptation Learning Network really is a project funded by a national funder, Natural Resources Canada, and a provincial government climate action secretariat, with a focus on building the capacity of working professionals to integrate and apply climate adaptation in their work. We know that there's a need to do that I was just talking to Emergency Management BC yesterday about this. A huge need to do that on the disaster and emergency management side. There's still a long way to go there. We know that we need to build that climate lens into everything that we do. Every sector needs to understand climate change and climate science and be able to integrate that understanding and translate it into action into their profession, whatever it is they do. And this focuses because I have been teaching for the last 13 years in emergency management, but I think it's equally true in engineering and planning, in community development, economic development, et cetera. So we're really geared for how do we start supporting professionals, understanding the need to do this, and then upskilling with some information and some competencies related to climate adaptation. So when I say competencies, it means different things to different people. Whoops, not sure what happened there. It means different things to different people. We're basically talking knowledge and skills and being able to apply those knowledge and skills, whether it's in, you can use competencies and competency frameworks to guide training, to guide assessment, to guide credentialing, whether that's formal or informal, and then obviously workforce development. Those are kind of the main uses of a competency framework. And the Adaptation Learning Network project has been developing courses for non-credit courses for professionals across various sectors like forestry, biology, agrology, engineering, etc. But we've also developed this competency framework. And the reason we developed a competency framework is a recognition that one of the other things that competency frameworks do is to provide some standards and some ways of building some commonality across different sectors and across different geographic locations, so that ideally we're working with a similar understanding of what are the competencies that somebody working either as a primary job in climate adaptation or integrating climate adaptation into their profession. I didn't build the slide deck, so I'm just going through. I don't know where we've got animation. Anyway. The Adaptation Learning Network, the competency framework is called the Climate Adaptation Competency Framework. It describes 24 competencies. Each one of those is broken down into behaviors and ways that should provide ways of assessing that competency. There are assessment criteria, some general proficiency levels, and also an implementation guide. So core areas: climate adaptation science and practice literacy. So that includes things like climate change science, indigenous knowledge systems, because here in Canada, at least, it's very critical that we are both acknowledging and working alongside indigenous communities and their indigenous science. Climate adaptation leadership has a bunch of competencies obviously related to leadership and change management and decision making. Working together or collaborating, so communication, cultural agility, engagement in climate action, cross-sector collaboration, understanding the challenge, so being able to assess what the challenge is and also use futures thinking and innovation and design thinking to understand and try and develop solutions to what we're facing, understanding the risks, and also personal resilience, how to stay well and healthy and support others doing that in the context of what is very challenging work. And implementation, so planning and implementation, competencies related to solution design and policy and mainstreaming adaptation and monitoring and evaluation, etc. So here's one competency example. So this is one of 24. They're broken into domains, but this is one of 24. So iterative risk management. And you can see under this competency, we've tried to describe, as I said, behaviors that we know would need to be there in order to be able to assess and understand whether yourself or somebody has developed this competency. We're doing a sort of V2 of this framework. We're going to be adding in a competency that's more related to technical skills, and also adjusting some of the language here, because as we've moved forward with this framework, trying to align these behaviors with learning outcomes and training proved really difficult. So we're going back into it to adjust it. The competency framework itself was based on a lot of desktop research, interviews with about 27 professionals, a number of them who you would recognize from the States, but also internationally and from Canada. So it's a very well-researched competency framework. And it was also workshopped at Adaptation 2020 and a number of other workshops in Canada. So as I said, there are the competencies, the domains, and then 24 competencies described and elaborated with these behaviors that describe them. We also have tried to articulate levels of proficiency, because in addition to understanding whether a competency is being assessed and how it's being assessed, part of that is understanding at what level, so what level of proficiency. So we came up with this four-level or three-level scale, and I'm just going to move this out of my way. Four-level scale, sorry. Where there's, a proficiency around sort of basic awareness, understanding, very fundamental, moving through basic, skilled to expert. And we know that as people either are looking for training or workforce and employers are looking for folks that have competencies around adaptation and resilience building, a proficiency scale can be really helpful in order to do that, because different levels of jobs and different types of jobs will require different proficiencies. And it's going to be the rare individual that is highly proficient in all 24 competencies, because we know that adaptation is widely distributed across a number of behaviors, a number of kinds of orientations. You might be leading, you might be more focused in risk management, risk assessment. You might be in engineering, you might be in planning and really needing to bring teams together and be more focused on the collaboration and facilitation skills. We do think that everyone needs some level of competency, at least an awareness level of competency of all 24, but people will have varying levels of competencies, proficiency in those competencies depending on their work. Sorry, I'm getting a message. In the competency framework document, I'll share the link with you. There's also some role descriptions in teams, just trying to get a sense of, if you're looking at a team of people, you're going to want to bring people together, whether it's an organization or a government department. It's this idea that this will bring people with different levels of proficiency, different levels of understanding and competence in the range of competencies. But you really want to look at that across a team, for example, or if it's a working group, or a community collaborating with a number of consultants. So we've included that in the framework. I don't know why this is not working. We've also included an implementation guide. It talks a little bit about things that you can consider around implementing the use of a competency framework, and why and how you would do that, either in a human resource process or in some other process. So that also is included in the guide. Then I just wanted, and that's the whirlwind of the, and I realize that the link is, I'll put the link to the competency framework in the chat. This is an example of some of the things that we are linking to the competency framework. So this is just launched. It's a climate action practitioner micro-credential program that's at Royal Roads. And, you know, micro-credentials are growing in their popularity and their use. They offer short bursts of training and education, usually at lower cost than, say, doing a degree, certainly less time than doing a degree. And they're part of that upskilling the workforce, so that in the case of climate adaptation, so that an engineer or a planner or a biologist is not going to take necessarily a whole degree, but they do need to understand and be able to integrate climate considerations in their work, and micro-credentials is one way of doing that. So this one is an example. You can see this one is launching in March. It's a 4-month micro-credential. Each course is 4 weeks long and has embedded assessment, so that at the end of it, you get a recognized credential that is portable across jurisdictions from a badging organization called MyCred. So competency frameworks, training and education, and building this capacity and capabilities within the workforce is a huge part of what we do. And I think a huge part of what needs to happen now that we are sort of on the cusp. I think in some ways you're further along in the States than we are, in terms of governments really embracing climate adaptation and resilience, and then working towards it. We do have a national adaptation strategy in its early stages. It's pretty not so exciting. And we have one here in British Columbia that is actually a really robust strategy, but is also not getting funding. And I'm sure you're encountering some of the same issues. But I think nonetheless, we're on the cusp of a groundswell of people understanding that these climate impacts are going to happen more and more, and that we need to build our resilience, whether it's in infrastructure, buildings, people, communities, etc. And I'll just finish off with saying, you know, yesterday I was talking with Emergency Management BC, and we had, as some of you may know, a really hard year last year. In addition to COVID, we had heat dome, and over 100 people died. We had really bad wildfires. An entire town was wiped out. And then we had huge atmospheric rivers that caused unprecedented flooding in one of the richest agricultural areas here in BC. So again, I think those things are waking people up and waking the employers and sort of people who are in the workforce up to the notion that we have to deal with this. I think now we have to work on supporting people understanding that they need to develop these new competencies, integrate them into the work that they do in order to meet these challenges moving forward. So thank you. I'll put the competency framework link into the chat and stop sharing. That's the whirlwind tour.
So I just want to comment that the competency framework in the US is the Department of Labor has a competency model that we use, and it is sort of in the shape of a triangle with the basic competencies for workforce. And then as you move up the triangle, there's layers 4 and 5, and that is the occupational competencies, and you know, those would be unique to every occupation. And so these models are great to have because and to do one, and for ASAP perhaps to sponsor one, because many associations do this, and it serves as the standard, right? And that's great. And as Robin said, these competencies don't necessarily mean that you have all of them, but that somebody in your organization has them. So I'm going to look at the time here. We don't have much time. Anna asked me to look at the National Climate Resilience Workforce Act. And so she mentioned a lot of things. It is sort of an ancillary to the infrastructure bill, it tries to plug a lot of holes in. There's stuff on immigration, granting people workforce, climate resilience workforce status if they're working in jobs in climate resilience, and trying to some worker protections as well. There is a structure there to include an Office of Climate Resilience and a Center for Climate Resilience Workforce. But it gets down to not really knowing what these jobs are and directs the Department of Labor to look at those more and to figure that out. And of course, the tone of the climate justice, the looking at frontline communities, giving them the grants in their communities to include these jobs. So let's see. Okay, so what are the climate resilience sectors? And of course, it's everything, right? And it's the same. So they've got it broken down at mitigation and adaptation and disaster preparedness, and covering all sorts of infrastructure, both built and social, and all sorts of industrial sectors like transportation, commercial, and agriculture. So this is not new to us in HACCP. We've seen this diagram, part of the work that Anna McGinn, Savannah Bertrand, Rachel, and I worked on, although Savannah did all this, and really these adaptation job skills are really in all parts of the economy. Last September, EESI published their fact sheet on climate jobs. If you haven't seen it, let's see, I have it I can put it in the chat. And it was an excellent way of putting this, there was also an explainer done on the adaptation jobs and what these jobs are, why they're important. And my role in this was really to count the jobs and to figure out what those jobs were. And like Robin said, the jobs are showing up. And I brought, and I want to say that this was sort of a process of, the work that ACEP's done. First, doing a first cut on their knowledge and competencies framework, and really having a database of job postings, and doing a adaptation jobs blurb in their last fact sheet with SE, and then really looking again at their jobs. But they had new inputs, this climate change journal and the Lighthouse Group, and then with labor market intelligence, some software that I brought to the table. We were able to do this climate fact sheet, this second version of it. So how do you find these jobs? Well, sometimes they're in the titles, like Robin said, but we're really looking at the skills. And I used a technology called Burning Glass, which has now been merged with another company. So the way it works is you put in the skills to do a query, and those jobs come up, and then you can further add or remove jobs that probably don't fit the what you're looking for. So when we did this, there's a position, there's a classification in the Bureau of Labor Statistics called climate change analyst, which is primarily a policy. But this software had actually already found 17 climate change skills. So those are what we started with, and added a few more to find this universe of jobs. And I just pulled this up yesterday. So there are now 23 of these. So this is very similar to what Robin's saying. And the skills are really what is key here, right? So we often hear of the skills gap. You can have people, they just don't have the skills. All right, and then let's see, I don't have anything here. Okay, for some reason that didn't show up. Okay, so I had a screenshot of what this looks like. And sorry about that. So I had a screenshot of the Burning Glass software that showed how many jobs came up, the geographic distribution, the average salary, and as well as the top occupations that were showing up. And so I just wanted to show you that there were occupations that didn't make sense. And so as part of the process of finding the jobs for this publication, we just really had to look at the data itself. Because ASAP had such a great policy on what is an adaptation job, it was really easy to find, to kind of stick with that definition and to find any new jobs that perhaps didn't fall under those 17 climate change skills. We actually, I think I think Rachel had like about 300 jobs for 2019, maybe a few more for 2020. And we were able to, I was able to cross reference those, and only 100 of her jobs were in this Burning Glass. So I think we had about over 1,000 for 2019, about 1,200, over 1,200 for 2020. So what I wanted to just finish up with is this notion of what is a good job. And in reading this legislation and talking about jobs, we often think about, oh, any job is a good job. And it's not quite true, especially if we're going to think about in the context of these frontline communities and what needs to happen, right? So in workforce development, what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop the workforce, right? We bring people in. If they have no skills, we give them bridge training. We give them the skills in order to get the job. And then what? Then what, right? So what are their options? Do they build a credential? Can they build upon that credential and get a different job or a higher paying job, a newer a job in a different sector? What is that pathway? So I didn't introduce myself, but I'm a former researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in freight transportation, and I also managed the Midwest Transportation Workforce Center, developed apprenticeships, and developed career pathways. So what we found, and this is nothing new to the workforce developers, is that that we really need to make everything that we train people for count. And I mean that if you're taking some course, that becomes a credential that can build and get people to an associate's degree or perhaps to a bachelor's degree. And this is in this talk of, what we need all these workers. This is not new. We've had in 2018, the U.S. actually surpassed the number of jobs. There were more jobs than workers available in the US. And so that put the whole industry into a panic about trying to find and trying to skill every single person that can work. And it is just interesting that we can think about the industrial needs, think about our climate needs, but also think about the worker needs. So I'm going to just stop there because I think it's probably over, and you can leave. We have some time for questions.
Thank you, Mariah and Robin. So I will check the chat, but if you have a question, raise your hand. If you want to start a discussion, let me know.
Yeah, this is Rod. Hi, Maria. I'm with the flood mitigation industry, and we're looking at 1 million jobs in the next 20 years to adapt our buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And our machine operators that elevate buildings make $100,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes down from there. All the trades are going to work, and we're pretty darned excited. So is Department of Labor and Department of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
They're really getting excited. So we'd love to work with you. All right, we got to mitigate all those millions of buildings.
That's right. Weatherization is one of those good jobs, right? So what is a good job? One that's 9 to 5, that's family sustaining, right? Some jobs that may take you away from the family, that creates an unstable environment. So these are things, just we need to think about. But those are great jobs. And how do we get more people with the skills in order to enter that workforce?
Frank, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, this is an amazing set of talks. I come from the education side of the equation. I'm at NOAA, also part of the Department of Commerce. But one of the things I'm looking at in that pathway is, that pathway starts much earlier than most of the times we talk about. That pathway starts in at least middle school. And you mentioned associates and bachelor's degrees, but a strategy that we need to have, I would assume you would support that it would both be an education and a reskilling strategy, as opposed to just let's just get the current workforce retrained. Do you also see those competencies, and I guess this is for both speakers, both extending into what happens in schools and universities and community colleges and all forms of learning, and what happens in once you're employed or about to be employed?
Yeah, I mean, I'll respond to that. Absolutely. I think, ideal world, climate change and climate action, however you're framing it, would be infused in our school systems so that, kids are exposed to it in the same way they're exposed to other subjects throughout the life of their education, with growing understanding and awareness. And we have some good, as do you in the States, we have some good examples of that, nowhere near enough. I know here in British Columbia, we just in the last, 2 or 3 years, introduced mandatory curriculum around integrating reconciliation. No, it's not climate, integrating Indigenous considerations and reconciliation. I think the same thing absolutely needs to happen around climate. And so it's an ongoing process. And I think part of our focus, part of the focus on the existing workforce is not, it's just not, partly it was the design of the project, but also a recognition that there are a lot of people out there doing good work. Yes, maybe in good jobs, I don't know, but good work that have no real understanding of climate other than what they've, heard in the news, et cetera. So they don't necessarily understand enough about it to do anything about it. They don't necessarily understand what they can do about it. So there was an emphasis there for us on saying, we have to grab people right now as we continue to work to influence. Like, we've got a joint partnership with a international baccalaureate school. So they do sort of like the last of high school and the first year of university. So we're designing a couple of courses for them in a creation of a climate action leadership diploma, and then really doing outreach into educational systems. We've got another project working here and in Puerto Rico to try and help students and teachers develop design thinking skills with a focus on climate. So how can you be active in your own communities, your organizations, your schools, in designing solutions or ways of addressing climate? So I think it's a critical thing for us societally. I don't think we'll manage without it. And I think we need to be pushing in multiple directions to get that to happen.
Thanks, Robin. Honora, you have a question?
I'll just say one thing. That last year I started working on an idea that I had about embedding climate change literacy into worker training programs. And so I went around, talked to our nonprofits in town, and they said, wait, I don't know anything about climate change. So you have to train me. So we have to train the trainers and as a part of the solution.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, like, I'm in an oil and gas heavy industry state of Louisiana, and trying to talk to people about doing any kind of climate change adaptation that involves getting away from that dependency on those industries always brings about, well, this is the jobs. And so I think if you could also, I guess the question is, are you also looking at the competency people already have in these jobs that are going to go away that can translate over into climate adaptation jobs. I think that's a very important point to make of how those, like our oil field workers can build windmill platforms the same as oil platforms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's, I mean, I think that kind of orientation, to say to somebody, you have no skills and you need to retrain, but it's not true, right? Every worker has skills that can translate into different areas. And I think too, and obviously we have a large, not here, well, even here in BC too, but, oil and gas industry. And those workers are understandably concerned and scared, but it's like, it's coming. So how do we support them? Retooling, maybe integrating some new ones, reapplying the ones that they have in other directions, and understanding that, I think, will be the first step, because the resistance comes from that fear of, we're going to be out of work, forget about it.
And I'll add that there's a lot of advancements in learning sciences as well, that somebody who never was able to do math can do math, and in a really short time. So we need to look at those learning sciences to help that transition. I've worked with displaced workers in the past, and it is difficult sometimes to move from a task-oriented mindset to a growth mindset.
Sorry, David, we don't have time for your question, unless everybody's willing to stay a little longer. Mariah and Robin, if you can stay a little longer and answer David's question, that'd be great. But I just wanted to make sure everybody knows we're at 11 o'clock. There's an evaluation at the bottom of the agenda. If you could fill that out before you jump off. Really appreciate everybody showing up today. It was a really great attendance, and we had some really great speakers. So Mariah and Robin, thank you. Anna, thank you for your updates. With that, if
I'm fine to stay on if
okay, so we can have David and Robin, if you want to.
This is two seconds, guys. In late 2018, I stumbled upon some stats that were posted by marketwatch.com about the growth of the resilience industry. So they took several sectors and combined those, kind of like you did. And they said it would double between 2020 and 2024. It was going to double in size, somewhere in the neighborhood of $274 billion industry by 2025. And I'm sure the pandemic has accelerated that, but that's just some background information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's for the last, like I said, I've been teaching and working in emergency management, and now I run this climate adaptation learning network and a climate action leadership master's program. And sadly, I think we're in a growth industry. This is not going away, and we know that however we frame it, whether it's around disaster risk reduction or adaptation, or don't use any of that, like resilience, whatever, there's going to be a growing need for it for sure. Anyway, thanks for having me at your meeting, our meeting.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you. It was
excellent.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, both of you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.